And now we're going to get all emotional on you. Which countries are the most and least emotional? We've got Max Fisher here to break down this fancy map over my shoulder. A Gallup survey checked the emotional status of 150 different countries, Max, and you've visualized this on this handy map. So I guess what did we learn? Where are people real emotional and where aren't they?
Well, it's tough to draw too many conclusions from the data, but a couple of the first big takeaways are, first, if you look at the post-Soviet countries here, they scored the lowest on emotional. And what that means is when they were asked questions about did you feel this positive or negative emotion the previous day, they were the least likely to answer yes, positive or negative.
And so we should say the yellow and
right.
and the green are the least emotional, and then the purple, especially the dark purple, very emotional. And we see a lot of the Americas are dark purple.
Yeah, the Western Hemisphere, kind of amazingly, is really purple. And if you look over the map, you'll actually see that English-speaking countries, Australia, New Zealand, US, UK, really purple, as are the Spanish-speaking countries. And the Philippines actually scored the highest in the world in terms of emotional responses.
So, I mean, this raises as many questions as it answers, but what are some of the interesting takeaways from it?
Well, you've got Singapore as the least emotional in the world, and lending a little bit of, it's tough to know how seriously to take the survey, but Singapore actually takes very seriously what it calls its emotional deficit, and the government is very involved in getting people literally more excited about being in Singapore, being a member of that country. So at least some people in Singapore are taking it very seriously.
So this shows emotion, not necessarily happiness or sadness. So what do we know about whether these are positive or negative emotions?
So the way that this worked is Gallup called people up in all of these different countries, and they would ask them these questions about did you feel this emotion, did you feel this way, and it got to positive and negative emotions. And it can be a little bit misleading because you see, wow, Iraq is really emotional and the US are really emotional, it must be similar. Actually, it's really different. Two of the highest scoring countries in the world, Venezuela and Bahrain, were totally different. Venezuelans had really, really high positive emotions, very low negative emotions, and Bahrain completely opposite. So that gives you a sense that this is maybe not a perfect guide to understanding the different societies, but kind of a rough way to getting into these bigger stories.
Yeah, I mean, I've been lucky enough to travel through a bunch of these regions, and I think me and a lot of people looked at this kind of like, hold on a second, this doesn't seem quite right. And one thing that just starkly jumped out at me was West Africa, a part of the world I've spent a decent amount of time in, and you notice that the English-speaking countries, Ghana and Nigeria, are both supposedly much more emotional than the French-speaking countries they're surrounded by, Togo, Benin, Burkina Faso. And that makes me wonder if it's just the phrasing of the question in these different languages.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think the survey, as you said, it raises more questions and has opportunities to explore these kinds of things more than it does answer them. Of course, you see France itself as one of the most emotional countries in the world, so it's tough to know how highly to gauge the role of the language and ask them. And then the two Portuguese-speaking countries in Africa, totally different answers. Mozambique and Angola. There are so many different variables that can play into maybe how these countries are responding, which just goes to show you how tough it is to quantitatively gauge something as kind of soft science-y as how emotional is a society.
Perhaps the fact that I'm responding so emotionally to the survey points out that it's
As
actually
an American.
on the nose.
That's right.
Max, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
That'll do it for us for tonight. We'll fold things up. See you back here tomorrow.